This is the 419, brought to you by Wetro Wealth Management. The 419 is hosted by Gretchen DeBacker, Matt Killam, and me, Kevin Mullen. And this is the 419.
How are you guys?
Jesus.
How's it going?
All right.
How is everybody today?
Right.
Wait, we have
I've
to have
got an
witty.
idea for our app.
We have to. We have to have witty repartee before you bring your guest in.
Okay. hold
Is
on.
that what it's called?
Yeah.
Witty repartee.
Well, in our case, it's just repartee.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. That's a good point. I don't know. Matt just walked away.
He's back.
That's not helpful to the recording of
Sorry,
a podcast.
I'm recording another podcast across the hall.
It's hard to get him coordinated.
You know what? There's a lot of them.
Is that rude? Oh, right.
Talk about rude. Talk
Look,
about the
even
timing
Dominic,
on that
even
one.
Dominic is offended by that.
Goodness gracious.
I'm sorry, guys. I know your phones aren't accustomed to ringing, but that's actually one of the functions. They do have calls that come in.
So I feel like this is not one of those things where we need to start with
Charm.
right.
A plan.
No, I was going to say
sorry.
silence your phones,
Oh.
unwrap your candy if you're going to eat
And
it.
I have.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right. God damn it.
Anywho.
And we're back.
This is we actually let you have a guest this time.
That's right.
Yes.
And I'm very excited. This individual I have been hoping for quite some time.
Oh.
They were born in London, England. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, right? So
Okay.
somebody who's not for making America great again. England did not care
No, they didn't.
and continued.
They tried to stop us,
That's right. That's right.
from what I've read.
That's right. For you history buffs out there, they work tirelessly, although they do work very hard one particular day of the week.
Interesting.
Okay. They are an individual in
It's a
uniform. It is in that same vein, Chris Hanley, please come out. Oh, thank God. Literally, thank God.
Hey, welcome.
Literally, thank God.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can come right here, sir.
My dear friend, Chris Hanley. I don't know if you know these two,
Chris, nice to meet you. Kevin.
but they're,
Hi,
okay,
Gretchen.
you don't.
Nice to meet you. No,
Great.
we
No.
don't know
Yeah,
each
well,
other.
good. Their souls
Yeah.
need to be saved. Chris, I don't know how long you got. How long
time.
does an exorcism take? We'll find out
my
tonight.
experience, yeah, 45 minutes.
That's right.
That's impressive.
So let me introduce-
Is it just it's a one size fits all?
Depends on Matt's going to be my backup.
Yeah.
Would
Okay.
be for that.
Totally.
Yeah, sometimes if you need additional help, you just bring in more
Matt
people.
for anything.
Yeah.
Almost all of our guests say the same thing.
I thought they were just applied to Ghostbusters.
Yeah, well, anyway.
Same thing.
So this is my guest. Chris and I are close friends, certainly to me. We met actually in improv, where most people get their spiritual guidance from. I love Chris. He has been a resource to me, both personally and largely professionally, as somebody who works in the community. Glad to have you on, man. Introduce these two clowns.
Tell me what congregation. Tell me about a little bit more about your profession. So where are you, the pastor?
So I'm the pastor of Glenwood Lutheran Church, right next door to the Art Museum.
Nice. That's a beautiful building.
We like it.
Never been inside.
Yeah. And they won't let you.
Yeah. It's by court order.
Yeah. That's right. It's at 500 feet. That's an amazing, yeah.
How long have you been
Even
there?
Dominic's shaking his head. She's telling the truth, Dominic.
How long have you been with Glenwood?
I've been there it'll be 7 years in May.
Okay.
Have you always lived in Toledo?
I
Just
grew
said
up
he was
in
born in London, England.
Oh, that's right. I wasn't
Yeah.
A
listening.
lot of active listening on this, Chris. Just make up whatever you want. These two bozos don't. Yeah.
lived in London, England for like 3 months, but I grew up in a suburb of Chicago.
Okay.
I didn't know where Toledo was.
Sure. And still don't. So where in Chicago?
In Northbrook,
Yeah,
Illinois.
sure. I know Northbrook. Yep.
So not actually in Chicago.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people get
They get
frustrated
offended.
about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
shocking that people get offended
Yeah.
by something so inane.
Right.
Yeah. Real rarity.
Was this always something you wanted to do, or where did this this vocation come from?
Yeah, I grew up in a Lutheran church. That was it was a good place. My dad was Roman Catholic, and my mom grew up in the Methodist church, and so like Lutheran was a good compromise.
Kind of in the middle, right.
And it was a half block away from where I grew up. But then when I was 11, my father died of melanoma, and so the church was like a place where we'd go and do, but it was just kind of like a context until I was like a kid grappling with the big questions of like, why am I here? What happens to people? And those questions just never really went away.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, through a winding road, what led me to be a spiritual caregiver.
Well, thanks for the uplifting tale.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Show's over. But talk to me as a place of salvation to some degree. Your brothers and sisters, if you got them, is that where you went? How did this help you sort of grapple with grief or continue to help you?
Yeah. I was the only one that went the church direction of the four of us. I'm the oldest of four. But everyone made meaning out of it in different ways. And even in that like oldest brother role, the like caring for people and sort of leading in that way by just like sitting next to my siblings and kind of having our own conversations about it. I think that's been its own kind of expression of like, this is just sort of calling.
Sure.
As one says.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is the training? So I was raised Catholic. But how is it? What is the training? Do you? I'm assuming are.
At one time, you did
college
consider being a
educated?
nun.
I did.
Yeah, that's
Yes, I was recruited.
Oh yeah.
I turned him down.
I'm serious. I
No, I am serious.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I
Well, I was
only
serious
turned him
first.
down because, first of all, I was in 8th grade, and it was like
That's
it seemed
early.
way too young.
Yeah.
Because back then they would have, I went to Notre Dame Academy, and they would have the aspirants would like live at the school. You know what I mean? And you would live with the nuns like when you're like 13 years old, which
Right.
anyway. But
Is
I
it
went to
aspirants?
Aspirants is what they called the women
Aspirants.
that were going to be the young women that were going to be nuns. But I went one time for a weekend, and I
Is
thought
that the deal breaker?
I thought it very odd that they wore their habits, because back then they wore, the dresses that they all wore, and then they were playing volleyball, and they just they kept their dresses on, but they all had tennis shoes on. And I never had seen. I couldn't comprehend it. Like, I was in 8th grade.
Yeah.
So I decided I just didn't like the outfit.
Usually when somebody says an anecdote on the show, I say interesting.
You're
Is
not
this
saying
more
that
terrifying?
This time.
I don't. Yeah, I'm not going to say it this time.
Let's just pretend. Let's just edit it out.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
But I'm assuming college education. What is the study?
Yeah. So you need to have a college degree, and then it's a master's degree. It's a master's of divinity, which sounds very
Always
impressive.
been a good student. It is impressive.
No,
Or
not
on this path, what were the other things?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. What other good things? What were your talents that made this sort of?
Yeah, I was like one of those students that was a good test taker in high school.
Okay.
So I got by, but like I didn't,
Right.
like not a ton of it stuck. I could just take tests
And
well and kind
regurgitate
of
it.
exactly.
Sure.
When I found out, I went to a small liberal arts college, St. Olaf College in Minnesota.
Okay. Big football program.
Yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
the school of 3,000.
Yeah.
When I found out
Isn't that Garrison Keillor? I knew it. I knew listening to Garrison Keillor would one day pay off. Wow. And here it is
That's
paying
right.
off.
It helped me sound there.
See, and I just went straight to Frozen. That's where
Yeah.
St.
Yes,
Olaf. I just went straight
yeah.
to Frozen.
Yeah.
I didn't realize
the
that he
snowman.
yeah,
Yeah.
founded a university.
We're never going to let you finish the sentence, so just know
That's-
that going
welcome to
in.
the podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you. I found that you could just study whatever you wanted, which is like a dangerous thing to discover. So I studied a bunch of ancient history and Bible classes where you could read the Bible critically and try to get under,
The layers of it.
and the different
Sure.
layers and languages and some of the history of how the Bible came to be. It's like, wow.
Right.
So that was the stuff. I just came alive studying that. And
So, and never fearful of this. I mean, honestly, obviously you're not cutting through or examining Citizen Kane for its theatrical genius. This is the Bible.
yeah.
So that wasn't intimidating by any means, or
It for sure. I think that's also what made it exciting.
Sure.
Is that figuring out some of the history of the Bible and how it came to be, and the world that the Bible was written in. those are things that are still like living parts of people's faith. So it is
absolutely.
this, figuring out how to do that and have good conversations about that is just a fascinating enterprise.
That to me, there's a vast difference between, even when we talked about your education, right? You're not just consuming it. The transition between consuming it and then spreading it, that does take a different skill set. When was the first time that you were, and maybe it's part of the process of being certified to do this work, but when was the first time you were responsible for spreading the good news or working your way through the Bible and telling others?
Yeah, that would be, I think it was in like 2011. It would have been from my home church. They like brought me in to preach as like a seminarian, and the sort of thing.
Intimidating? Were you nervous?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
And the sort of nervous where it's like just spent hours and hours in that, like everything that I ever wanted to say
Yes.
about
Right.
the
Make sure
Bible,
you
I
get
like
it in.
inflicted.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
6
And on
hour
another
homily.
topic.
Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
I never liked Jeff Smith in fourth
Yeah.
grade. Let me tell you about that guy. And I can tell you
Now that I'm
firsthand.
in the pulpit,
That's right.
I've got a couple things.
That's right. I hope you enjoy Purgatory, Jeff.
A reading from the letter of Paul to that guy. With a
Yeah.
jacket.
Look what we found. Yeah.
Hey, who knew Paul wrote something to Joe Smith? Huh. He had some things to
Right
say
here.
about you. Yeah.
But your home church, talk to me a little bit about that, even the layout of it.
Yeah. So that would have been different than the one that I grew up in. I grew up in a don't know how far we want to get into like specific Lutheran history. I grew up in a
The show is almost entirely about Lutheran history.
Oh, thank goodness.
So
Yeah.
fire away.
I grew up in a Missouri Synod congregation, which is the Lutherans that are not ordaining women pastors.
Okay.
The
Gretchen, comments?
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Agree.
Chris.
Can't trust us for that kind of thing.
We're wearing sneakers with habits, for God's sake.
But the pastor of that church was a liberal pastor in that community. He had took a stand with his congregation to march when Dr. King came to Chicago.
Yeah.
It was a suburban congregation that did not want him to do that.
Yeah.
And Pastor Gotch said this is what he was going to do. And
Yeah.
so found other ways of like empowering women leaders in that context. And he was kind of like a Dumbledore to me. When he retired, the person that took over for him just did not do a good job.
Okay.
And so my family went to the ELCA church in town,
Okay.
which is the tradition I'm still in, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of
So
America.
your mom had to carry the torch to some degree. I mean, she was taking you.
She did not let us vote on that decision. She
Yeah.
she said,
Not most houses
Yeah.
aren't democracies.
Yes.
So I'm sure. But
Yeah.
Tell me about how she kind of picked up the house with her 11-year-old now oldest son. What was that? What was that path like? How did you
Yeah.
work all together?
she was just tough in the sense of
Yep.
like continuing and like one foot in front of the other was just like how she
This is how we're gonna do
how
it.
she made it. And so like even that week after he died, she was like, let's go to the Shed Aquarium in
Yeah.
Chicago. Or like we're gonna do things as a family to just keep and
Yeah.
keep the structure in place as much as possible.
Right. Keep you guys moving and breathing.
Exactly.
One foot in the other. Yeah.
That was how she did it.
So, walk us through getting to Toledo, Ohio, and I want to talk about your current congregation, all the great things that you're doing in an important part of town.
Yeah.
But how did we get from A to Toledo?
Yeah. At the time, the process that I went through was a little bit like the NFL draft, where they take
The combine,
we did
bench pressing. and-
yeah, that
What's your time in the 40?
Yeah.
my 40 is great.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's a good 40? Yeah.
Yeah.
All the folks that are like ready to have their first church, you submit your paperwork, and then the bishops from around the country in the ELCA or their advisors will get together in one place and they'll look at that paperwork, or have looked at that, and then this is how they used to do it. I don't but we used to call it the draft, and they would just they'd say like, I want this person, or I'll pick this person. So I got a call on a Monday morning at 8 a.m. from someone who introduced themselves as the Bishop of the Northwestern Ohio Synod.
Huh.
And I had no idea where that was.
Yeah.
Like they're praying with me. This is like now my dear friend,
Sure.
Marcus Lorman, who's fantastic.
Yeah.
But he's praying with me, and the whole time he's praying, I'm thinking, Cleveland sounds cool. Like,
Yeah.
I can't wait to move to Cleveland.
Yeah, sure.
And then I told my mom, and she looked on a map, and she's like, Christopher, Cleveland is pretty far east in
Yeah.
Ohio.
Yeah.
Almost all the way.
Almost all the way.
Chris, when we were talking about your education before,
Geography was
how
not.
many states did you cover, just
Yeah.
out of curiosity? Just Illinois mostly?
My-
Discovered historical maps.
I was going to say,
Not
exactly.
current.
My ancient Mediterranean history and that geography.
Ask him something
I
about
could,
that.
I could tell
Yeah.
you where Smyrna is.
Yeah,
But
easy. I'm taken.
the ancient one. I think
Yeah.
there is a Smyrna around here that I
Yeah.
have no idea where it
There's
is.
one in Georgia.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Is that
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
This sounds made up.
Yeah.
No, 100%.
Oh, it sounds like I don't care. I just want
That's
to
what
make
it
sure
sounds.
that. Yeah.
That's what it
Oh,
sounds.
my mistake. My mistake.
Yeah, I want to make sure that there's an important distinction before, and I think you're making that too. I don't care either way.
Right.
Didn't
Yeah.
just sound like it.
I don't want my
That's
face.
the
I
case.
don't want my face to show anything. Be like, oh, tell me more.
Yeah,
because
got
I
it.
don't want that.
Yeah,
Okay.
got it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to cower back into my seat. I'm just going to do a Gretchen for the next few minutes.
Yeah. You couldn't. You couldn't. Chris, please interrupt these two clowns. You just found out where the great land of Cleve is, and you're headed to Ohio, the 19th largest.
Had
state
you
in the land.
accepted an offer before you realized that it was Toledo?
So the way that it works is I was called to the Northwestern Ohio Synod.
Okay.
And that could be anywhere in sort of the northwestern corner of the state. So I was hoping that it would be Toledo. So I went to the Northbrook Public Library and I started just like looking at the encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Like I found out about the Toledo War and
Sure. Yeah.
We
you,
won.
You say
yeah.
So
Did we?
So you say you were called to Northwest Ohio. Like,
Yes.
did you have a say in this?
No.
Is this part of like a vow? Is there a vow of obedience?
There's ways, especially at the time, that you could say, I've got a family. I want to limit to this area,
region.
but there's only so many churches that are accepting first call pastors.
Yeah. First call pastors. I'm sorry. What is that?
That's just this is your first church.
Okay.
Like the first
Rookie
time-
season.
Exactly.
And do
Your
you-
rookie season. Exactly.
Okay.
And you
Yeah.
you said when you're ready. So does the individual self-identify as being ready to put themselves into the draft?
You go through that master's program and then you do a year-long internship. And when you've completed that whole process, and the church gets to do their own evaluation and interviews to make sure that you're like
Got it.
the kind of person they'd want to send to a church. Then you go through that process.
Okay.
I really
so when-
love the visual of this just being an NFL draft.
Yeah,
There being
it's
like
awesome.
A war room with like
Actually,
stats.
they've already
Who's
picked-
the Mel Kiper of the? Of
And I
the-
like that it's on.
It is actually Mel Kiper.
It's on ESPN also, which is awesome.
After they
actually
pick the
not
people they
surprising.
want, they just like they have a couple ping pong balls. No one on that. Screw you.
With the number one overall pick.
That's right.
and that's
5'9" out of
2017.
Northbrook, Illinois.
Yeah.
So you get here. How do you decide what to do? What's the first thing you did?
The first thing I did was going through an interview process with Glenwood, and
Who interviews you?
it's like folks from the church, like their call committee, and then their church board, and then the whole church gets a chance to meet and then vote on me.
Oh my gosh.
But the first thing I did was they offered to put me up in a hotel downtown, and I said, you know what I'd really like to do is stay at an Airbnb in the Old West
In the
End.
neighborhood.
Because
Yeah.
that's the place
That's where I'm gonna serve.
yeah, that's the place where I'm going to serve. That's
Yeah.
where I'll also get to find out kind of about the neighborhood itself and about like what the reputation of the church is in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So
And forgive me if this puts you on the spot, but your own sleuthing, what did you hear about your church?
yeah, so my Airbnb host Michael Loomis
Yeah.
had just told me, oh, there's a church there.
Yeah, sure.
Like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I guess I've seen that church. I've never.
I think
Yeah.
I parked there when I go to
Yeah,
the museum.
exactly.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that became that pretty quickly got to be like the first item on my to-do list. Like how do I make sure that people in my neighborhood and
Yeah.
in Toledo know that there's a church here.
Yeah.
And that if they want spiritual care, I don't necessarily expect them all to become Lutheran.
Right.
But if they
Not
need a
yet.
pastor,
Not
yeah,
yet.
well,
That's right. That's the year 8. Right.
that's of the plan. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
right,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, we can add that part out, man.
Yeah.
Don't
This
worry
is part of the plan. This was.
Yeah.
This is on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, consider our 2 listeners converts. We'll go to their houses.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in that. So
Yeah.
I grew up. So I grew up cradle Catholic, but my mom is Lutheran.
Okay.
And it was interesting because through attending different Catholic churches, different priests were okay with my mom participating, and some of them weren't.
Yeah.
And my
How
mom's
does that mean? What do you mean by participating in this sense?
well, like communion's a big deal, right? And so like
You're not Catholic, you're not supposed to.
Catholic
I'm
and
sorry,
Lutheran.
Gretchen, I didn't realize I asked you.
I did.
Yeah, so Catholic and Lutheran approach, and you could answer this better than I do, but approach the Eucharist. How it gets there is different.
Okay.
The path is different.
Okay.
And so where it gets to, or actually maybe I think actually where it gets to is different as well. But whether it's a symbol of Christ or whether it actually is
The body.
the physical
Understood.
body
Okay.
of blood.
I do need to make sure that your Lutheran listeners know that
Please, God. Yeah.
it's for Lutherans and for Catholics. We believe that Christ is really there.
Yeah.
In that
was gonna
meal, in
ask
that
you that.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we believe in the real presence. The distinction is it? I'm not versed on the Catholic teaching of this exactly, but is it only Jesus and no longer bread, or is it both? So the Lutherans teach that it's both, and how is a mystery.
Sure.
So that's
Okay.
how we.
That's good
Yeah,
information.
Exactly.
consubstantiation and
With-
transubstantiation.
Kevin.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
Kevin.
How about it?
That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the big
So
guns.
know
I
you
wasn't
don't listen
going
the
to
show,
chime
Chris,
in.
but this is the first time anything of substance has been provided by Kevin. So this is like a big
He's
deal.
filled with the Spirit.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So
Before
I
thought it was schnapps.
So throughout high
That was
school,
well
I
done.
was
Thank you.
I was considering becoming a Jesuit priest. I was like,
See, Kevin?
yeah,
You
it was close. Yeah.
How about it?
Yeah, it was close. I still remember a conversation that I had with Mr. Richard,
Okay.
who was a theology teacher. He's since went on to become the campus minister of the school. But I had met with him because I was like, I think you might be the most religious person I've ever met. Why are you not a priest? And he said to me, I still remember that he said, fatherhood is a vocation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
And he wanted to be a dad. And I had such incredible
Oh,
experiences.
fatherhood. I'm sorry. In terms of being a dad.
Being
Understood.
And so not being like a father,
Understood.
like
Gotcha. Yep.
Priesthood, right.
right. And so he said like being a dad is this
Yeah.
vocation, and I'm like, well, I want that too.
Yeah.
And that wasn't an option,
Right.
right? Within
Right.
Catholicism, it's not an option.
Right. And you were sort of hedging the fact that no women wanted to have intercourse.
That
with
was
you.
also
Yeah. But
sure.
that's just math.
Yeah, right. I was just playing the odds.
That made the that made the convent interesting as well.
Yeah. Goodness gracious.
Turns
So-
out, no difference.
So
I got the tennis shoes.
I wear tennis shoes with skirts all the time now.
it's actually funny how that's come full circle.
Who's
for you,
laughing at
Gretchen.
who is my question.
No, we're laughing at you. Oh, you weren't asking. I never get those. I don't know rhetorical.
So,
God.
so growing up, my mom wasn't always welcomed fully into
Yeah.
the Catholic Church, but her whole response was like, "Well, I'm raising 4 boys as Catholics. Like,
Yeah.
how is that not enough for you?" I'm curious what the open door welcoming policy is of Glenwood Lutheran. Is it like if you're not Lutheran, you're not welcome, or let's talk about putting you on a path to this, or what does that really look like?
And how that relates to the sacraments too would be
Yeah.
what I would be interested in.
Yeah. Long before I got there, but something we've really tried to emphasize is that, like what I say each and every week, is that this is Christ's table, and I don't have the authority to bar anyone from this table that Jesus has welcomed
Yeah.
people to. So we've got folks that have Catholic family members, sort of a similar situation, and it's really important to us that they're always invited to Holy Communion, even though they're Roman Catholic. And if that's our understanding is that the Catholic Church will, or some of them will accept Lutheran
Right.
communion because we believe in the real presence of God. And So we've tried to emphasize that and really make explicit. We've got like a welcome statement now that's part of our liturgy, that it's like no matter your past, present, or future, you're made in God's image, you're welcome here.
Yeah.
No matter your gender identity, sexual orientation, or gender expression, you're made in God's image, you're welcome here. We kind of go through a litany of things so we make crystal clear. Like,
that you are not the Catholic Church.
That's
I was just going to say, I don't get the Catholics there.
Don't answer that, Chris.
You don't have to respond to that.
So what about you?
But I think it's a really incredible sort
It
of
is.
community piece, and I think the important role that churches play in community, right, in building community, and I think that's been, I mean, my own criticism of my own faith and a lot of the churches
Which
in
is
town
important to you.
is that very much so.
Yeah,
but I
yes, I
think,
know.
but the challenge is that I think that it's become, the excuse for Catholicism that I regularly hear is, well, we're a global church and these are American issues, and it's like, well, no, I think
I think God's fairly global.
Yeah.
So I think, and Chris, not to make you feel uncomfortable, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on. Although I don't attend your church, you are welcoming to your core. You are walking it.
You can feel it.
Yeah, and I thought that about you from day one. And I guess I want to transition into Chris the pastor and Chris the human being. Tell us every single thing that's challenging about being a pastor and a human being. And we've got 5 more minutes. No,
You can consider this a confession.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I do. I do want to know. We talked a little bit about your schedule, but the boundaries of it. The challenge is your own push and pull based on leveraging your belief system in the world that's ever changing.
Yeah, what are you responsible for at the church? I mean,
Yeah,
is it
thanks,
everything?
Gretchen.
Is it
Thanks for adding on to my
fundraising?
question.
I just wanted to
Jesus
make it clear.
Christ. I
because
don't
it was
understand.
so
Like,
dumb.
did we not all get a question? It's like she always says something.
I don't know that it's recommended to use the Lord's name in vain while you're interviewing a pastor.
Yeah, Chris, tell him to leave. Can't you just tell him?
Chris agrees with Kevin.
I see.
As
yeah.
does the Lord.
I'm not. I'm not judging.
Yeah.
I wouldn't dare.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I apologize, Chris, and to our 2 listeners.
It's one of my main jobs is swear police.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
And making
Sure.
people
Yeah,
feel
exactly.
badly. That's
Yeah.
that's the Catholics.
Guilt is.
They love it.
Guilt is sort of our language.
I'll go to gas stations and people will be like, shit. And then they'll see me in my collar and they'll say, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, Father.
Do you ever want to just be like, ugh, say sorry to him?
I'll do that.
I would ride that out. I mean,
Well, that's what I typically say instead of when somebody says, Jesus Christ, it's like, you tell them about it.
yeah, I love it.
That's good.
Sounds like-
That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. But please, Chris, the man and the pastor, how do they work together? When are they in conflict? Tell us everything.
They're always in conversation.
I love it.
Yeah.
And so in terms of things that I'm responsible for, like you mentioned a big one, like working hard, especially one day.
Yeah. It's your big day. Is
it's-
it Tuesday?
Typically Sundays.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
right.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Like he says, typically.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not.
Sometimes not.
Sometimes
Christmas
it
Eve
isn't, though. Sometimes
moves
it
around. Good Friday's pretty stable, but Sunday's the one that I'm dependably. So figuring out how to. This is, and increasingly these days, this is the day when folks will show up to be a part of. We don't have like a ton of Wednesday night things. Even during Lent, we don't really have Wednesday night things. Like Sunday's the day where I get to connect with folks.
Yeah.
And so it's figuring out how to delve into these ancient texts, in sacred texts, in a way that people will have an experience, an encounter, maybe even with God in that
Yeah.
space, and how that encounter of forgiveness might help them to become more loving people. So we've got an hour on Sunday mornings to do that.
Figure this out.
Through
Piece of
the
cake.
through the songs, through the actions we take in the liturgy, through anything that I have to say, through maybe conversations afterwards, like an
Sure.
adult Sunday school.
Yeah.
Like this is our time to
Commune,
carry that
get
out.
together.
Yeah. On top of that, it's your sort of leadership, like working on a board. I've got a church council that functions as the board of the church. It's fundraising through stewardship. It's keeping an eye on the building, even though there's people that are way better at that. It's it's everything that sort of goes on in that space, and the trying to be attentive to Glenwood's relationship to the community and to the stories of people inside the church, and the story of the church itself.
You have a lot of free time.
I also heard you say working tirelessly, and that's.
I thought that's one of the things you wrote down you wanted me to say.
No.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's, what was it? I'll think of it. It's really important to me that, like, Chris the pastor and Chris the person, my biggest thing moving here, I was single at the time when I moved to Toledo, and so it's like, I've got to be able to stay healthy.
Yeah.
There's lots of stories about people coming in saying, I will work tirelessly and I will only do this church job and try and change the world through this one church, and they just burn themselves
18
out.
months later, they're basket case.
And maybe they get into tons of conflict with their church, and then they ask to be, they go look for another church.
Yeah.
You're not a rookie anymore. You can talk to your bishop and say, I want to get traded.
Yeah.
Because it's a relationship between me and the church.
Sure.
So my biggest commitment right away was like, I've got to stay healthy as a person so that I can be a leader in this community.
What's something new or unique that you've started at Glenwood since you've been there? Like a program or something like that?
Yeah. The two things that come to mind are some of the biggest things are a real emphasis on talking through race in my church.
Sure.
Glenwood has
Why did you pick that?
Glenwood's had a history of being a multiracial church for many years, and has for a long time had like a Martin Luther King celebration. But when I arrived, for kind of various reasons, they didn't have the leadership in place to carry that on. And so we'd had a diverse congregation, but we weren't having those conversations that really made that fostered that sense of belonging, especially for our Black congregants.
Yeah.
And so,
Chris, you were a kid from Northbrook, Illinois, for which I know the demographic of Northbrook really well.
Yeah.
This is potentially a challenging question, but why did that come naturally to you? Did it not? Or what was the process of, I'm from Northbrook. I've just been transplanted in Toledo, Ohio. And one of the things that is important for my flock is race relations.
Yeah.
It's not like you picked up the bake sale here. And I mean that in a sincere fashion. This is a giant issue that is by no means on its way out. So what made you tackle this? What's the sort of strategy around it, if that's an accurate way to ask?
So in between college and my MDiv, I did a year in the Lutheran Volunteer Corps, and I received some anti-racism training.
Okay.
And that's that kind of.
Where were you geographically?
I was in. That training was in D.C., but I was stationed in Wilmington, Delaware.
Okay. Which is more diverse than you might think.
Yeah,
I've been in Wilmington, and I just assumed everyone looked like Joe Biden.
That's not the case.
It's a diverse population. Okay.
And so that's the place where that was like a whole year of kind of coming to terms with my suburban upbringing.
Sure.
And learning about other ways of living in the world and having really good conversations. So then when I did that MDiv, I served at a church in the south side of Chicago. It was a Black Lutheran church that trained me, and that gave me a community to begin some conversations and to continue those internal conversations about how does race play a role in my life.
Sure.
And so that was something I was eager, that's its own sense of calling to a specific way of doing ministry. And so being called to a congregation where there's an opportunity to have those conversations, sometimes painful conversations.
Absolutely.
That was something that just felt like I had to do.
I just read an article, not knowing you were coming, obviously, within the last week. If I find it, I'll send it to you or send it to Matt. But it was basically about the church writ large, and that there is still such almost complete segregation between Black churches and white churches.
Yeah.
And so it seems like you're uniquely positioned to have a congregation that is not that way.
Yeah. And that's that's something I noticed about Glenwood from day one, like that there's this sort of unicorn church in that sense. And that's also been one of our challenges, is because there's a temptation for the white congregants to think like, well, we did it. we've got
Mission accomplished.
Yeah,
That's right. Well, that banner is still available.
the we did it banner.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mission accomplished. Yep.
Yeah.
Crushing it.
So that's been one of the things that we've continued to have conversations about.
Very
is
cool.
what does it look like to, and who do we ask?
Yeah, right.
In terms of like what does belonging look like? Do you feel like you belong here? My white congregants are sometimes still kind of shocked that I'm not asking that question in the same ways or with as much persistence to them. It's like, because there's a sense that you've got so much power here.
And you're welcome everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. Sure. I get it.
Yeah.
You've been in this role 7 years.
Yeah.
I imagine about the time when you were maybe like starting to get a little bit comfortable and feel like everything was good, the world shut down. 3 years in, 2020. I'm interested in sort of how your role and the congregation has changed over the last 4 years, sort of coming out of a pandemic.
Yeah, I just thought you would have thought of that question, Matt. But
how do you think these idiots get these questions? I have to write.
You write them.
I do all the heavy lifting here.
That was,
and continues to be
stunning. Yeah. And I responded as. I don't know if I responded as best I could. We committed to live streaming our services, and that looked like me, like in the day when it looked like everything was shutting down, realized like I probably need a new iPhone in order to like have a little bit better video quality, and like because we were just for that
Chris,
whole
I've known
time.
you well. I've seen you. That video quality.
It's
negligible.
I mean,
it doesn't matter.
okay.
Trying. It was COVID.
Yeah.
And that was the first time we'd ever live streamed something. Like so many pastors will say the same thing. It's like, well, we never had to. And then
That's
the
right.
day when it looked like, it's like, wow, they canceled the NCAA tournament.
They're
Like,
right.
This seems to be
Because
a
of the
real
election? Right.
thing.
Do people still want you to have that option?
They do. I'm always amazed by how many people say that they've worshiped with us. And I had no idea that we've got a congregant sister who worships with us in Kansas City. Every once in a while, like my sister
Most
or
of
my
my
sister.
girlfriends were from the Niagara Falls area.
Oh, yeah.
So, makes sense to me.
I don't know that that's near Kansas City.
He doesn't know.
Okay, that's fair.
Again, ancient
Cleveland's there,
civilization.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Cleveland is just east of.
Kansas City.
That's right.
I think.
Where do you think the river goes? That's a lake, I think.
I don't have any
Bail me
idea.
out, Chris.
But like I heard about lots of folks that were tirelessly like pushing themselves to, call every single one in their church like every single week. I tried to get my board to do that, and they did a good job.
Yeah.
I felt like I retreated into myself a little bit and taught myself Latin during that time.
Me
that
too.
was just
Me
like
too.
that's
right.
just what
I
it.
did.
That wasn't Latin.
I needed. And that was it. I like learned that about myself, that like in the face of like really scary things, my tendency is to try to avoid them or try to get into my head somewhere.
Yeah.
But my church they did a really good job, and they just hunkered down. They didn't have, even if they had different opinions about what we were going to do to keep us safe, we had a really good conversation about like, we had a team of folks that was making recommendations based on what the health department said and what the CDC guidelines were. And we didn't have lots of my colleagues had tons of fights with their church.
Yeah.
Sure.
And my church just said, what do we have to do?
What I know the answer, there's multiple answers to this, but in your opinion, if you had to pick one, what is the single most important trait for a good pastor or leader of a church?
It's listening.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Listening.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't laugh at that, Chris. Yeah. I mean, I know you have to be charitable, but there's a boundary that's not healthy for them.
Well, that was good.
Yeah,
It was good.
Yeah, Gretchen would have said it, but she hasn't heard a thing that you're saying. That's funny because it's true. But listening, first of all, you're a human being, as we talked about. Listening is a process.
Yeah.
And you are on stage every day. How do you keep that in check? How do you flex that muscle? Who decides whether or not Chris is healthy or not?
That's, yeah. So with being on stage, especially if we're thinking about Sunday mornings.
I mean, on stage
Yeah.
constantly. I mean, everyone, your congregation is watching and listening to what you do. I don't mean the literal stage like the pulpit. I mean,
Yeah.
eyes are on.
The world's a stage, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you get
Yeah.
you get drunk and obnoxious at a Mud Hens game. It looks and feels different than if Gretchen does.
When Kevin does
You
it.
swear. That's right. Yeah. Kevin calls those Tuesday nights with the fan.
I do that every Sunday. I mean,
It's filling time.
yeah, you
But I mean, you
Yeah.
you
Vocation
swear
out
at
of
the
mine.
gas pump. It's a little different. Right?
Yeah.
So
So improv is a really important place
Sure.
for that.
which you're good at, by the way.
I'm not as good as you, but
That's
I'm
why I had you
always
on the
working
show.
on it. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for coming on, Chris.
That part was scripted
that
too.
one sentence.
You've met
was
my
the
little brother,
whole
Chris, right?
reason.
Yeah.
All of this was just to lead you to that one
Just
sentence.
let him finish.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That sense of playfulness.
Yeah.
Like there are things that are off limits to me for my own values' sake. That it's
Yeah.
like, being belligerent in public somewhere is the reason to not do it is because that's just not
Who you are.
who I am, and that's taken like kind of years of. I didn't have a more belligerent phase necessarily before this, but certainly like recognizing that like I've got to live in tune with what I have to say or like the person that I want to be in the
Have
world.
to walk if you
But
talk it.
and that the temptation to take myself too seriously
Right.
is always there.
It's a line between those two, right?
We've had
Yeah.
other faith leaders on, and this is a really interesting portion of it. It is very difficult because quite literally, you people are consuming what you're putting out, and you are, by definition, the leader. So staying humble is difficult if you are a toll booth operator, right? Not to
Yeah.
look down my nose at that profession, certainly, but you're the one that gets them through the gate. So how do you, again, how are you making sure that you are the humble servant that you know that you're supposed to be?
I think it is
Do
those
your
like
looks help? I bet your looks help. Is that night?
That was me.
Yeah. Oh, well, I love him. I brought him on. So
I don't even know what it means, actually.
Also, I love that we're talking
wasn't
about
sure if that was a compliment or an
Yeah.
insult.
it wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, he's my friend. I can say what I want.
clarity is one of the things that Matt really brings to improv, and especially the talking about my looks or like what I'm wearing
just
on
yes and
a
it.
totally audio medium.
Yeah.
Like,
It's a fair point.
yeah, Matt's doing great.
That's why he's the leader, and I just have this dumb show.
Yeah.
But humble is
So
that's tough. What,
It is the sort of it's those kind of bigger picture, like what do I really think that I'm doing? Like there's a great image of ministry from it's a gay Roman Catholic author, James Allison, who says that being a part of the church, especially in leadership of the church, is like working at a restaurant, and you're not the chef. You're one of the wait staff who's trying to provide the things that like God has been cooking to people that are there that have been invited to be
They're hungry
the guests
for it.
at this. And the wait staff always thinks that like people are there to see them.
Yeah.
And so trying to remember, it's like, no. I'm just passing on
That's right.
what has already been prepared for you.
Interesting.
And then trying to think of sermons in the same way too, that the sermon is a place where I'm trying to model that kind of engagement with the scripture. And instead of saying, you all should do this, trying to look at myself enough in the mirror to say, this is where I see myself in this. These are my blind spots that the text is exposing, and trying to start a conversation that then is continued with this like adult Sunday school afterwards. I always try to say, anything that I've talked about, we can talk about afterwards.
Yeah.
Where do you
like that.
where do you or how do you draw the line between like, Chris the person, this is a story I'm not going to talk about in a homily, and this is parts of my life that I will share, right? I got to believe that it wouldn't be healthy to be a complete open book.
Yeah.
Good question.
I'm always asking.
Can you share the private stuff?
The private stuff here and the
Yeah.
You have more people in your congregation than we will ever have listened, so you're good.
Yeah, Kevin, that's a great question.
This is
trust
like the
him.
witness protection program.
The confessional, the witness protection program. You've got some great metaphors for this show too.
We're really good.
If only we had
Torture chamber.
Torture chamber. So boundaries.
I'm always asking if there's anyone else involved in this story whose permission I haven't gotten to tell this story.
Yeah.
I'm always asking where I am in the story. Like, do I come off as the hero in the story? That's usually, so that's a good place where it's like, I will cut that story because it's like, that's not a story where I'm changing. But when there are things that are too specific or just like, I've known my congregation for 7 years at this point. If that's the only thing that they will hear, and if that's the only message, they'll just remember that one detail about my story, then it's distracting and I won't tell that story.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
They're
You
disappointed about that.
You mentioned earlier that you came to Toledo when you're single. So can Lutheran priests, you call priests? Pastors marry?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yeah. That's something that was really important to Martin Luther 500 years ago, that we have multiple callings and that the calling to be a priest shouldn't exclude these other callings in the way that it did. So,
What's some of your?
so Martin Luther got married to a nun.
How about that?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did she wear tennis shoes while playing volleyball?
It's hard to say.
She invented the tennis shoe.
Interesting.
Catherine von Bora.
So
Yeah.
are
Is
you
that
married?
true?
No.
No, it's not married. No, it's
Man,
not
that was
true.
good.
Oh, don't look down your nose at me.
Tennis shoes in Martin Luther's day.
Everyone took one pause. I just had no idea.
But the delivery was really
That's what I'm
solid.
saying, man. He's the best.
He's
that
good.
was great.
He's good.
Chris, it has to be challenging for your brothers and sisters. I don't know what they do professionally, but at the end of the day, you're like, well, your brother Chris wouldn't have done that.
They're all more successful than me.
Well, but
Not in the eyes of the Lord.
That's what I try to tell myself. That's how I go to bed at night.
that's what I
taken about
looking down my
poverty.
nose at them and making them feel less.
Yeah.
Sometimes I text them.
My treasures are rich in heaven. That's it.
Mine
They're like,
too,
we're
Chris.
enjoying them today.
Mine too. I don't know. What did you say?
We're enjoying them today.
Oh, I wish I wouldn't have asked.
The siblings.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about them and your camaraderie with them. They call you and say, you know what, sister, do you know what your brother did today? What is that relationship like?
Yeah. They are, they're all doing different things.
Yeah.
My brother Patrick works with my sister-in-law Jessica in their linen and sleepwear company.
Okay.
Piglet, that's based in the UK, and has headquarters in Northbrook.
Okay.
Very cool.
And he's the one that's like politically active, is really involved in North Shore Democrats and in the town of Winnetka where he lives.
I know Winnetka. Yeah.
So
beautiful.
he's a community leader
He's an
in
advocate.
his own right.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The rest of the brood?
My sister Bethany is a pediatric nurse in
Okay.
San Diego.
Yeah.
And is also, was helping people more tirelessly, I think, in many
You haven't
respects than I
If you
am.
haven't looked up
Yeah.
San Diego yet, don't. Because you'll be very disappointed that Cleveland and Toledo is where you've...
Yeah.
This is as good as it gets right here.
That's
This-
right.
The climate.
A lot of people
here-
call
Yeah.
Toledo the San Diego of Ohio. Or they will.
I mean, with climate change,
yeah.
it might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to have the last
Yeah.
water on earth
Yeah.
right here.
That's right.
Sadly, I
Nice.
said that's why I bought an SUV, is I'm trying to get us to like the Carolinas climate. And then I'll get an electric vehicle once we get
That's
there.
right. That's right.
It's that line I'm
Kevin's
thinking
doing
about.
his part. That's
Yeah.
right.
Just trying
Everyone's
to help
got
out.
to everyone's got to pull their weight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my youngest brother, James, is a clinician at like an eating disorder clinic,
Okay.
and is married to a first grade teacher.
Okay.
So
Is your mom still living?
yes, she is.
So is
yeah.
she where is she still living?
She's living in Northbrook
Okay.
in the house we grew up in.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's a travel agent.
Oh,
Okay.
nice.
Yeah.
All right.
Has she come to visit you in Toledo?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, I think I don't know if we asked this question and the doors are open, but when you talk about the people that come to your church, you talk about the group. How would you describe them? Who is your community there?
Yeah. So the people that come to Glenwood are folks that have been there for a long, long time. When it was like a destination church, they would, drive from the suburbs and come to Glenwood. It's folks that this has been their neighborhood church and they walk to church sometimes.
Yeah.
And folks that, for whatever reason, found it because I've got one congregant that was looking for a multiracial church, and she said, "I didn't want to be the only black woman, at an all-white Lutheran church. I also wanted a church where there was some real diversity, and it could have some challenging conversations about diversity. So it's a real mix of folks, which is a thrill."
You're talking about a real mix of things. Obviously, there is Sunday for worship, but the church acts as sort of a beacon for all kinds of things that the community needs. What all happens within your four walls that serves the community that you love so much?
Yeah. So even just like going through a week, there's a program through Catholic Charities called Opportunity Kitchen that is cooking right now in my church. It smells amazing.
Yeah.
And that's like a culinary training program on Tuesday nights. Sometimes friends from improv and I will just we'll get together in one of the rooms and yeah.
If you guys could hear that was Gretchen from across the hall.
Yeah. Wednesday nights there's a Narcotics Anonymous meeting.
Sure.
Thursdays a program called Food Not Bombs cooks in the kitchen. And then on Fridays, there's another Narcotics Anonymous group. On Saturday nights, there's a Narcotics Anonymous group. Like every single day of the week, there's something going on.
As there should be,
Yeah.
right? So, as someone who has participated in Alcoholics Anonymous, the church is many things to many people. It is an accepting place for people to gather. So as someone who did not have faith in their life, I know that that's important to you, and there's any number of things that people need access to. Toledo can be a hard place to get around in if you don't have a vehicle. Right?
Yeah.
And many people who need help don't.
Yeah.
So I know that's something you're particularly proud of, and you've continued that tradition there. So I'm sure you're proud of yourself.
Yeah.
Just breathing in air, Gretchen.
was
That's
gonna
what she
ask
brings to
you
the
to
show,
go.
guys. Go ahead. Guess what?
I think we're close to winding down. I don't want to say for Matt's, since you're Matt's guest, he gets to decide how long you're forced to sit and talk to us. But I wanted to see what you do for fun. Like, what is something in Toledo that you love doing social other than improv?
So I don't know if the first thing that came to my mind, and then you said social, I was like, oh, maybe it's the wrong answer.
There's
But
no wrong answer.
After worship on Sundays, if I don't have anything else going on afterwards, I'll just walk next door to the art museum.
Yeah.
And after in terms of something that keeps me healthy,
Yeah.
just being able to have a bite to eat at the cafe, and then I'll just go. I won't try to see the whole museum. I'll just see a couple of things and just kind of let the great art do its
That's
work
amazing.
on me.
Yeah.
That's something that really I think keeps me healthy.
Yeah.
And then I do I guess the folks that work there that see me often, that becomes my own kind of community.
Absolutely.
But it's improv, having that place where I'm making an effort to not take myself so seriously,
Yeah.
and having people that I can play with and really,
And who love you.
yeah, likewise.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Gretchen said we had to end the show, Chris. So, she's got somewhere
Dominic
to be.
said it.
Yeah. Chris,
He's the
thank you so
producer.
much for coming on, man. You are keeping a very important institution, which is adjacent to a very important institution, not just the museum, but of course the Old West End, which is a sign of where we came from, and I think where we're all trying to get back to some degree in terms of community. Thanks for the time, brother. Hope to see you soon. Love you.
Pleasure meeting you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Huge thanks to Pastor Chris Hanley for joining us on the 419. The 419 podcast is brought to you by Wetro Wealth Management. Give Tim Wetro a call, talk to him or members of his team if you need help with investment planning, financial planning, insurance planning, tax planning. If you need to plan what you need to wear tomorrow, you could probably call Tim too. I'm sure he'd help you out. You can give him a call, or you can find them online, wetroadvisors.com. Thanks to Tim Wheatro for his support of the podcast, and thank you for listening. Keep up with the latest from Gretchen, Matt, and me. Search for 419 Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. We'll see you on the next episode of the 419.